Okay, looks like we're set. So let's go ahead and kick this off. So I do want to welcome everyone to this edition of the Our Ladies Dallas meetup event. My name is Sidika Watson. I'm a data scientist. Currently working at Eli Lilly Pharmaceutical Company. Have been doing a lot of work in data science over the years, and have been working with a group of ladies in the Dallas area who have been trying to improve their R skills. And so we've been doing all kinds of different things, working on group projects, and then also from time to time, especially lately, given the accessibility of all of these great speakers from around the country due to COVID, given this virtual format, we've been excited to invite some guest speakers. So we're definitely, I'm going to introduce our speaker in a little bit, but I did want to do a little bit of welcome and introductions. So because of this virtual format, we did have over the last several sessions, we've had people from, all over the place, Canada, Peru, India, I think Cameroon popped up last time, so I'm just kind of curious. Portugal, I think, popped up. So I'm just kind of curious to know if you could just type in the chat where you are, where you joining us from. That would be fantastic. I'm just curious to see how, okay, I see a few. Pennsylvania, Turkey, okay, Mexico's back. Welcome back, Mexico and Peru. Scotland. Wow, Scotland. We made it to Scotland and India. I'm just tickled. This is awesome. And I'm just not even trying to think about what time it must be in all those different parts of the world. So just the fact that you decided to stay up a little bit late or a little bit early to join us, that is awesome. Bangalore, okay. Miami, Washington, D.C., Argentina. See, Dr. Kim, hey. You are international. This is an international talk. Pennsylvania, I think I said that one already. Little Rock, okay. Welcome, Little Rock. And of course, a special hello to our Texas people, especially those in the Dallas area, since we are representing Our Ladies Dallas. Um, so what I wanted to do was, before we get into the speaker, I wanted to do a couple things. One was I wanted to, if I could share my screen for a second. Let's see, share. Okay. All right, so everybody can see my screen. So what I've got is just if you go to our meetup page, which hopefully you went to in order to get access to the Zoom session, all the information about tonight, you saw that not only was there information about the session we're having right now, but we also have a few other events coming up. So on February 9th, we've got a Flex Dashboard tutorial with Kaylin Medeiros. So that's actually going to be really nice. And then we've got an Our Ladies Dallas member, Pavitra, who will be walking us through the GT package, which she says she's used quite a bit. So you can learn more about these two sessions if you visit our page, and I can make sure that that's available in the chat, just in case for whatever reason you wandered in here without registering. So that's one announcement I wanted to make. The next announcement I wanted to make is about the format. So usually what we would want to have is to sort of warm things up, not just to warm things up, but to just to make sure that these forums are accessible to people at different levels, that the membership and the people who attend and the people who give talks don't necessarily have to be people who've used R their entire lives. They came out of the womb making GG plots. We don't necessarily have that as a requirement. So we also don't necessarily need people to give a 35, 40 hour long presentation and have that ready in order for them to want to give a talk. So it could be something as short as a 5-minute, 10-minute, 15-minute talk, where maybe you just had some cool thing that you did in R and you just want to share it. Maybe you want to practice a presentation that you're going to give at a conference, or just something cool that you wanted to share. Please reach out to me and let me know. So this would be the time that person would be speaking. so, so we don't have anyone signed up for today to fill a lightning talk role, but maybe next time. Well, actually, next time. So. Uh, Ahead of our Flex dashboard tutorial, I did have someone reach out to give a lightning talk. So I'm actually pretty excited about that. So if you did want to give a lightning talk presentation, you could sign up for the March 1st presentation. And as always, if you are interested in just giving a talk period, or if you have some ideas on things that we could do as a group, feel free to reach out to me. Okay. Before we get started, anything else? Not missing anything? I think we're good. Okay. So if that's everything, let's just go ahead and speak to the guest of the hour, Dr. Seo-young Silvia Kim. So I'll go ahead and share a little bit about her background. So she's an assistant professor in the Department of Government at American University, Ph.D. From the California Institute of Technology. She received it in 2020, and she researches in the areas of American politics, political methodology, focusing on political behavior. So just thinking about the topic that she's presenting today on reproducibility, on research, on academic research in particular. I'm sure she'll share a lot more about that, but she's done a lot of research. And then she mainly uses R and STAN, which you might be familiar with if you do any Bayesian analyses, to employ tools such as probabilistic record linkage, semiparametric regression, machine learning, and Bayesian statistics. Her Twitter and website information are all available on the meetup page. And so without further ado, I will pass it over to Dr. Kim.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be here today, and I'm pretty stoked that these people all around the world is present today. I admire the 5 a.m. folks because you know what? I live in the East Coast now. I still live in the Pacific Coast time. Biologically, I'm just not a really morning person. So thank you for that. So let me quickly share my screen. And then, so today I wanted to talk about reproducible art workflows for research papers. Now, I didn't have a set thing in mind when Sidika contacted me, but this immediately jumped to mind about what I wanted to talk about because I immediately thought, oh my God, think back to the times that you wasted because you didn't know that this was a thing. You didn't invest enough in making things reproducible. And I, no offense to my advisor, but you know, he's the type of person that went and say, oh, there's this thing called R, go learn it. And that's really it. And I think, no, he's a really great guy. But I think sometimes you might want a bit of a more handheld sort of guidelines about how you want things to be, especially in 2021 when as junior scholars, all of your research is expected to be reproducible. They can be ported to a journal when you make a submission so that later they can go through that reproducibility check, or just in general, you're expected to make these materials available to you unless somebody goes and requests them, right? So again, this is the I think the subtitle of my talk today is how not to screw your future self, or alternatively, it's about the 10 times that I got screwed and am still being screwed by my past self. Trust me, most of my January has been spent trying to repair the damage that has been done by my previous self in 2019 and even 2020. So I'm sure that we'll have a lot of questions, but I'll flow through the talk first and then take the Q&A at the back end. Right, so again, I think Sidika already gave me an introduction. And one disclaimer that I want to give is that I'm in the social sciences. So I'm at the Department of Government. I'm a political scientist. And I'm sure that this is a case-by-case thing. So for a STEM person, the reproducible workflow may be different, or some other field that I don't really know about. So I just want to say that no one size fits all. And I want you to see that this is just a guideline for one of those disciplines, okay? So I think a lot of the time, I mean, this was literally me just a month ago, looking at my code written 14 months ago, and I'm like, why did you do this? and sometimes I just feel like I'm like, why did you do this? And why are you doing this to me? And I have no one else to blame but myself, because most of my work so far has been at least the coding part has been done by me. And and this is again a talk about how not to do that in the future, or at least reduce the amount that you're just pulling out your hair in the end. Well, I would want to first say that it's okay that this is not a problem for this is just not your priority at the moment. When you are first getting into programming and data analysis, what really matters is that you make things work. It has to it can be clunky, but it has to run, and it has to produce something so that you can show your advisor something by next week, right? And I didn't know at the time what I didn't know. So, and I think the whole journey has been a really learning process. And I think I'm still learning. I do not believe for a second that 5 years from now, I would still have the same workflow as I do now. And I'm aware of it, but I think we can learn to mitigate that damage that we can potentially do to our future self. Okay, so so without further ado, let's actually jump into something more substantial. So I want to circle this around as the 10 circles of hell you can get into while messing with the reproducibility. And I think first sin that I can think of is not working in an art project. So, and a related sin, okay, oops, sorry about the first line, that's something's missing there, but a related sin is that you are abundantly using the set working directory function. And then it can screw you and your future self, or your future self who has bought another computer, has put that directory in some other place, or your co-authors even, who are definitely going to have a different directory, an absolute path that leads to those files and folders, right? So if you are not working in on our project, I think the first advice that I would give to people is that, oh, you definitely have to start by working on our project. So let me actually quickly show you how I would work based on my actual, let me just actually show you how I would do things in from my remote. So what I would do beginning on my remote for my new project is that I would go to first my GitHub, right? I have a bunch of repositories, and I would just say, you can all see my Opera screen, right? Okay, awesome. And then I would click on the new. And let's say that, oh, I want the repository name. I am actually making this for another project. So let's say that I set up on a repository name. I won't be touching anything. And currently I want to make it private. So I'll click that, maybe add a README and a git ignore. And, you know, just there you can search for a git ignore template, R. And then the green create repository button pops up, right? And so what happens is that you have just done an initial commit to a remote repository on your GitHub, right? And then assuming that you have Git and installed and it's authorized to receive those Git clone and pull and push, I would then pull up my command line. And then I would want to clone this repository to a directory of my choice. I have a Dropbox, and I recently switched to a Dropbox business for my students, and I rediscovered that it has it has a space in the folder name, which is terrible, but it can't be helped. And maybe this is the folder that I want to set this remote repository work in. And then I would say git clone, right? And then what did I do? I copied the HTTPS and then pull it up right here. And then because the remote repository didn't really contain anything, it has been quickly copied. And then finally, I would be moving on to our studio. So oops, let me shut that down for a second. And so let's say that you have opened up on our studio, and then you can go to the File tab. And then you say, hey, I want a new project. And then everything will shut down and it says, oh, new directory, existing directory. And because I already copied from a remote, I would be clicking on the existing directory, quickly go and find that particular, there we go, folder, and say, let's create a project. You don't need to necessarily go through that GitHub step, but you can actually just come here and then say new project, new directory. That's absolutely fine. I just wanted to show you how I would seamlessly start with a remote so that you can push and pull pretty quickly. Okay, so now we are under this root directory of this project, and it says it has an rproj file, right? A readme and a git ignore. And the git ignore file is pretty good. It's already been auto-populated by things that you would really not want to git commit. And we'll ignore that. But the first thing that I want you to do is work with the renv package. So I already have my library renv package installed, and then I would call that. And then I would say, I want to initialize this new R environment, okay? I know that I'm jumping into things, but I wanted to show you before I explain what this is about. So just like that, you have started on our project, and let me explain what virtues this actually has. So, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so back to the slides. Now, an R project negates the need to set up, to mess with directories. So once you start working in that contained environment, it understands that you always want to start from that directory so that you don't have to go and set working directory, Dropbox, subfolders, 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 subfolders. And once you open up that R project, because the root directory has been already set, there's just no reason to mess with those working directories. And your co-author can come in and say that, well, I know that this project has been placed on a different folder, but it still understands that that is the root where I can work from, so that I don't need to worry about where Silvia has set her particular set of project folders. Um, so that's the first point. And I want to talk about that related sin that I mentioned. So it's about using the set working directory. And I think a lot of people have, and I have myself used get working directory, set working directory plenty of times. A lot of the preliminary introductions to R actually actively teach that. And so you might be thinking, well, what's wrong with it? So this is a screenshot from the reputable Jenny Bryan and Hadley Wickham. And Jenny says, if the first line of your R script is set working directory, I will come into your office and set your computer on fire. And I have put up the link to the Twitter thread that is related. And I think I've emphasized enough that just setting the working directory will break things once you move that environment into something else. So, and that's the first virtue of working in our project. And I've already sort of hinted at this by showing you the process, but I think the second sin is not using Git or some kind of version control. And I used to think because I'm a paid Dropbox user, I'm like, oh, well, I can go back to the history of those files and, they save up to 4 months. What could go wrong? They sync live, real time, right? Or another time I was like, well, I'm not doing a software development. I'm not an RStudio, maintainer. I should be okay. I'm just doing my, little project and I'm on my own. What's going to be wrong with it? I learned the hard way that this was not the, the world that you want to be in. There is a limit to what the cloud storage syncing or histories will do. Sometimes it just doesn't sync. Sometimes it just forgets really old histories that you might want to go back and revisit. And even if you're not working in software development, I really want you to use version control whenever. On principle, I like to assume that your hard drive will, somehow die tomorrow morning, so that you want to really commit your changes, push to your remote, so that even if your computer, gets dunked into the swimming pool, you have a history of what you have done on your GitHub, right? And it's okay if you still don't if you don't know yet what version control is. I can't explain that everything at the moment, but it's basically, I think, a time machine, right? It's easy. You're leaving footprints of what you've done at different points in time. And so it's very easy to see what has changed between the commits. You can undo that. You can go back in time. And what's more, you can use branches. So you have that time machine, and then you can create parallel worlds in which, the initial steps were the same, but you've tried something like A in this particular world, you have tried B in this particular world, and maybe this A world goes horribly wrong. And you can still, delete that branch and say that, okay, that's not exactly what I wanted it to be, and say that, well, this B works. Why don't I make that the future of my code that I want it to be? And I think Git actually is a bit of a hurdle to a lot of users. I still have to Google every time that I make something that is not a simple commit, push, and pull. And I think that's okay. And I think that using your resources now to learn about using Git will really save you in the long run in the end. So third part that I want to mention is not using the renv package. Now I said when I was showing you through the RStudio that I'm not going to explain what I was doing. I'm going to explain this later. And so what is this renv package? So this is saying that I can and will control the entire environment that this R is invoking. You might have tried the session info function in
Sylvia, did we lose you? I see her.
I think I just did. Okay, so sorry for that.
No, I'm sorry. It's still saying I don't have permission yet. Oh, it's recording now. Okay, it's still recording. Okay.
Okay.
I think we're sorry about that. Thank you.
Thank you. And for some people, when I talked about this issue of packages updating and breaking your code, some people were like, "Oh, that's because you use tidyverse. Just use base R like I do, and problem averted." And I was like, "Nah, no. I like the packages that I'm using, and I think the developers are putting a great deal of effort into making these happen. And I think it's okay to use them, but just remember what versions I was relying on, and that's when the renv package comes in. It can use snapshots to capture the packages that you're using. And I know that some people really go the extra mile by using Docker. I am not there yet, but so while the renv package really talks about packages, the Docker really is controlling the system environment that you're working in. I think for a lot of people, maybe this is a little tad too much. Again, we're talking about research and not software development. Let me quickly move on to my next slide. And I think another mistake that you might want to refrain from is not having a consistent directory structure when you're performing research. I know that those in higher education, you're not going to just do one project and then move away. You are going to perform several projects, several data analyses. And if possible, it's best that you have your own favorite subdirectory structure, and then you remember what happens in those subdirectories. I have my own favorite routine. I put up a link to that in the slides. And for example, I like to put all of my R scripts under the R subfolder. It sounds simple, right? But it actually can be really helpful. So rather than messing with reproducibility inside a single project, I think this is more about a cross projects problem. You forget what lives inside what, and then later on, a year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you want to come and revisit that project. And then you're like, okay, I don't know where my scripts are. I don't know what order they were run in. I don't know where I started and where I ended things. So the fifth sin that you can, and surprisingly do, is messing with your raw data. I like to, again, I work with mostly publicly available data, so I can write scripts that automatically download the data from a certain URL, although I need to be aware that URLs do rot and can always break at some point in time. But it doesn't always have to be that. Maybe you have a bunch of files that you receive. Maybe you work in a wet lab and you just exported some of those raw data into your data directory. And sometimes people just almost unconsciously overwrite things in that data. And this is a particularly egregious thing, but a function like fix in R that lets you edit a spreadsheet like data and then just save it, that can be really, really damaging. You will later say like, why is the average from this file and that file different? Just not understanding what happens between them, right? You have to document every step of the way that you arrive at this final data product that you want to work with. And wrangling data is all good, but you have to make that separate from your raw data. What I've always also found was, another example. Let me give you another example of how you can almost unconsciously overwrite raw data. I recently downloaded a lot of zip files, and then because I'm using a Windows machine, and I used the download file function without the mode of writing binary, I had a bit of trouble because they changed the line feeds of all my files. And, like this carriage, whatever. I don't even remember what those are. And my instinct is like, okay, I'm gonna open my file, Control F everything, and then just replace that, save it, problem averted. Don't do that. If there's a problem with the data, that's okay. And you can just write the code that will fix it and then export the tidy data to somewhere else. Also, trusting your raw data blindly can lead you to problems, especially if you're not documenting the packages that you're using. I spend half of my time cleaning the rectangular data that I work with because they have been poorly exported and they have unclosed quotes, which really mess with the number of lines that is going to be exported and imported into my environment. Yeah, so this was my own example. I had to put up a question on Stack Overflow because I was panicking. Why isn't my damn zip file not being read? And yeah, so I really had that urge to just replace and save, but please don't do that. Don't mess with your raw data, no matter what. I think not having a set of ordered modular R scripts can also really mess with how reproducible you find your set of code later on. Ideally, I would have some sort of a make file. Like, you don't even need to go and run the R scripts one at a time from one start to finish. You would just have, make on your command line, and everything will be run in order. Now, there is a really great example by a researcher by the name of Zachary Jones. I've put that into the slides here, so I hope that you can go and take a look. I like to have my R scripts named and in order. So I would, for example, have a utilities file that is sourced into every R script that I use. Maybe my 01 file would be data import, 02, data wrangling, 03, exploratory data analysis, and whatever works for you. It doesn't need to follow anyone's convention, it's just your own. As long as they're consistent and you understand the flow of things, that's fine. It doesn't even have to be endowed with a number. But each of these R scripts should be run fresh in a new R session. And I think that is a mistake that a lot of people make. They run the R script on a session where a lot of things have already been loaded, a lot of environments have already been set. So, and that script runs, but later on they revisit the script, restart on a clean, fresh slate, and they're like, something's wrong, it doesn't run. My students do that a lot because they already had the data imported when they ran the analysis function, and then they knit the R markdown. It says, I can't find the data. And yeah, so you want to really make sure that all of your R scripts run afresh in a new R session to ensure that they work and not break. And of course, you can use R Markdown. I actually like to use R scripts unless I'm doing exploratory data analysis. I think that's absolutely fine. Again, whatever really works for you. Okay. And this was really a principle that's so basic in programming, yet something that I really, really didn't understand. That is not copy pasting. Copy pasting code is a sin that should be avoided at all costs. And I think that's because you don't come from a computer background, and you just don't understand how much havoc can be wreaked by copy pasting data. And I think, again, that happens because you're in a hurry. You need to make things work. You've already wasted so much time looking things up on Stack Overflow. You need that report by tomorrow. Why don't I just, copy paste a whole bunch of things, run the same process for 10 different objects, and then be done with it. It is dangerous. It can have unintended consequences because we're human. We can't juggle things, too many things at the same time. Maybe you wanted to make that small change to that process, then you have to go and re-copy paste everything. And maybe, just maybe, you forget to do that for that 7th object, and you'll have the wrong result. And if you doubt that this will be any beneficial, think about this. Maybe you don't want to discover that problem when the journal has accepted your paper and you are creating the files for reproducibility. It can even lead to retractions. And again, it makes things prone to mistakes that are extremely hard to detect because you're like copy pasting 1, 2, 6, 3, 4, 5, and then you just skip over things and you don't realize that you've done that. I think the per package from the tidyverse, using the map functions and the associated functions so that you can vectorize it, you can run things at the same time across different sets of objects, can greatly negate the need to do that copy pasting. The mapped, that function is also really good. My favorite, of course, is the good old map and IMAP cross to. If you have a process that you will repeatedly perform over things, I create a function, and maybe those functions will be used not just in this particular project, but across different projects. Create a package. I created my own GitHub package that I always sort of go and install before I start on my data analysis, because I have a bunch of useful things that work for me. I haven't done a CRAN submission. Maybe one day I will, but I'm sure that each and every one of your research is all unique, and you will have things that matter to you. And these functions will be unique to your research. And an added benefit to that is that writing, the experience of writing functions and writing your packages really improves your programming in general, I think. A related sin to this copy pasting or not making things automatic, I think is hard coding. A lot of times let's say that I have different versions of the same file, but it has a date suffix to it. So I have a data file and it says, 2021, January 25th.txt. And then maybe you had that same file, but from 2020, 2019, 2018, and you want to choose the most recent file. Well, you don't need to read table and then say hard code it into your script that this is a 2021 January file. You can automate things like using a list files and parse the date and return the max date to me. And we'll work with that file, whatever that file is. This is just one example. If you're, as much as possible, you should try automatically grabbing those values and passing them into functions or scripts that is useful to you. I think another sin that I really struggled with is not commenting properly. Human memory is inherently flawed. No one knows it better than I do because I'm always looking at my passcode. I'm like, what the hell have you been doing in this line 100 or whatever? You're not going to remember anything if it's been 2 weeks, a month, 6 months, a year. Definitely not a year. You are not going to remember. And a sparse commenting really, really wastes your time when you're like, okay, something is breaking, something's not working as it has before. I'm going to figure out the culprit. Where am I? And then you're like, but I don't understand what I've been doing for the last 200 lines of code. That's not a world that you want to be in. Sparse commenting really wastes your time when you're trying to remember what you were doing. Sectioning the code by in the R script, or just using sections in our markdown, I think really negates has the potential to make things memorable, and you can quickly follow your logic because you can follow your section titles and okay, I've done process A, I've done process B and C and D. Okay, that makes sense. And maybe you can check the intermediary outputs and then you see that, oh, okay, it's section C that has created a problem.
And if I could just add, that is a really, really important point, and I'm glad you said that, not only for yourself, for your future self, but also for situations where you're collaborating with other people and they need to get into your mind to figure out, okay, what was she thinking? Why did she set this parameter this way? Or
you don't want to be that person who the other person goes like, what the hell is this code all about? Yeah, I mean, if you think that somebody is watching your code, I think you can do this a lot better. I think the problem with coding in academia is that there is no code review. Oftentimes, only a single person is responsible for the entire programming and data analysis. The others, write the background literature, oversee and supervise it, but it's only that person that really knows what's going on under the hood. And that, if you think that you're the only one who is going to need it, you don't document things. And that's not good because your future self is not going to remember anything that you've been doing back then. Oh my God, tell me about it. It's been so bad trying to figure out what a 2017 me has been trying to do with all those code. It's a really bad thing. Comment it, like somebody's watching. Think about the volley. The star of your field is going to review your code. Like this really, really like prominent scholar goes and like, what's she doing under the code? And then just looks at everything. And then you'll start commenting like crazy. Okay. And Sin 9 is not writing and deploying tests. And then you might think like, oh my God, you said this wasn't software development. What do you mean tests? And that's what I thought too. Trust me, not a world that you want to be in. It's unit testing, but for academic data analysis. Let's say that, like, take some simple tasks that you've been doing. Substitute all your NA values for something else. Did that work? Why don't you just write it down as a test? Did this line of code do what I expected it to do? Oftentimes testing is not something fancy. It's just a simple one line assert that. That is actually my favorite package that I like to use. I'm sure that there are other really good practices, but assert that ensures that the whole thing just stops when that condition has not been met. This is the function that I've been using, and then you can use something like any or all functions to see if the conditions have been met without exception. And you're like, well, okay, of course that line of code did what I wanted it to do. Well, you know what? The behavior can change if you put something in between, or accidentally load plier after deployer, or things like that. You never know when the bomb will go off. So those tests are not stupid. They will save you from disasters. And trust me, this is from a battered veteran that's been through all those disasters. And I'm still like, I have a lot of time ticking bombs from my old research that I'm really afraid of what's going to happen once the package dependencies break. So this is the last point that I wanna say is not automating your figures and tables. That's okay. And when you're early stage PhD and you just need something to work so that you can present something and you're doing an all-nighter. Eventually, you want to create those figures and tables completely automatically. Manual figure creation, not something that you want to work with unless it's like a diagram that you just want to draw out. If you have a regression, or a simple table, use the X table or Stargazer. Doesn't matter, but make sure that they are exported to a Word document or a LaTeX file or whichever works for you. But make sure that you grab those, and this saves you a lot of work, because oftentimes the first tables and figures you create are not the ones that will be your final product. You make a ton of changes. You can't go manually change all that. It has to be automatic. Something that really came back to bite me really badly is the options of setting digits. I was like, okay, that's too many digits. I would go options, digits, set to. What I didn't understand was that this is scientific digits. So if you say, options digits 2, a 300 1, 2, 3 becomes 300 when you print it. And then 1.123 becomes 0.12. And I was like, oh my God, this is a miracle. This average is somehow 300. What a great number. And later on, I was like, this doesn't exactly sound right. And then, yeah, it wasn't. It definitely wasn't. Imagine me go and, replacing all those numbers in a table for an almost finished paper. Not the world that you want to be in. If you want numbers after the decimal point exactly, you might want to use format C instead. And this problem would have been averted entirely if you had used automatic tables, right? Yeah, so I think that was the 10 circles of hell in reproducible research with R. Not working in our project, not using Git, not using renv, consistent directory structure, messing with your raw data, not having a set of ordered modular scripts, copy pasting code, not commenting, not writing tests, not automating figures tables. There are probably a bunch of things that also mess with reproducibility, but I've already forgot. But that just tells you that there are a lot of hurdles that you want to make sure that you don't want to step into that black hole. Whoops. So I think just a couple days ago, Hadley Wickham gave a talk at the RStudio Global Conference about maintaining the house the Tidyverse built. And I think I really like the point about avoiding off-label usage of functions. So I'm not sure if a video is available, but you might want to check that out. You can also use a crayon time capsule to pick a day in the past and make sure that you can reproduce the packages that have been using. But I think the renv package is infinitely superior, and so there's that. I have on my slides, and I'm going to make those slides publicly available to you. There are a bunch of extra sins that you can commit in research. It would take another 3 hours to go over everything, so I'm not going to go through those all, but you might want to take a look at some of the things. I couldn't even put them into a single page. You know what? For the last week, I've been updating those slides. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to talk about this too. And oh my God, I forgot to talk about this too. So yeah, I'll leave you to check these out later. And I think the common feedback that I get when I talk about these things is like, oh my God, where is that time to spend on these things? Like, I'm so tired already. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Yeah, the slides, I haven't made them public yet, but they will be available in the meetup, either on the meetup page or my website. You know what? These guidelines, these sins that I've talked about, at least they're actionable. And trust me, they will save time later on. So in the end, you will be saving massive, massive amounts of time. Another person, somebody said on Twitter that time spent making replicable analyses is never wasted. I cannot agree more. You will be doing a service to your future self. Doesn't mean that I've been a perfect researcher, doesn't mean that my current workflow is perfect, but there is value in striving towards reproducibility and open sciences. And I think we want to really embody that growth mindset. I can't be perfect right now, but at least I'm working to try that. You know, somebody else can come in and run my analyses and get the same results as my published paper, or even my future self will go and revisit the things that you've done and still see the same results and figures and tables. So that's it for my presentation. And thanks for listening.
Excellent, excellent. Wow, thank you. There was so many great tips. There were so many times where I wanted to just jump in and say, "Wait a minute, yep." Absolutely, 100% agree. So yeah, I definitely agree with what you shared, and thank you for being available to share that. We do have some time for questions, so if you have some questions, you could either post them in the chat or raise your hand. I believe in the lower, is that in the reaction section? Yeah, if you click reactions at the bottom in Zoom and click raise hand, then we can tell you to unmute, and you can go. We could be good to go. But okay, so we've got one question in the chat. I'm quite new to the renv process package. Can you use the info from the package to share with colleagues and students? Do you have any experience of doing this?
Yes, so I haven't gone back and let me actually just quickly go back and share that new project that I've set up. Okay, so so we are back into that RN package. We are in that R project folder. We've loaded that. The console shows that the root directory has been set already. All right, so what I like to do is the following. Let me, where's my gist? I actually have a gist file where I like to put some of the things that I usually do at the beginning of a new project. And so let me, this is part of how I can show you how to use renv. We've already ran the renv in it. So let's say that I have a, I think, sorry, let me try that share screen again. Okay, I think that works. Okay, so here on my GitHub gist, I have a bunch of things that I like to run. And because it's going to take time, let's just install packages, DevTools, okay? And then my internet is slow, but okay, this new DevTools is being installed. So I think I was a little, I jumped into the RN a bit without really explaining what it was, but so it has a separate library folder for the own project. So let's see. So in the root folder, you now have a folder called RN. And then you have, staging, library. And then because I'm using R4, I have another folder here, right? And then it sort of shows you what my system environment looks like. And then there's this bunch of library packages here. And whenever you jump into this R project, it's only going to use the packages under its own folder. So it's like a separate Galapagos where this is a safe environment. So you unless you make additional updates, this is the packages that you'll be using. And then once I've installed that, I would run a renv snapshot. And then it says, I'm going to preserve the status of my packages at the present time. So I run, okay, so the log file is already up to date. What is that log file? Let's go and see. You can use this little icon to return right to the root directory. I did not know this tip, and I wasted time trying to go back to my root directory. Okay, so now we have a new file here. It says renv log. Okay. And then it says, okay, so this is the renv package. Oh, so this person is using a 4.0.3 version of R. This particular package of RN, has been installed from this particular, for this particular version from CRAN. This is the hash. And let's say that you actually updated it and then you want to restore it. And then you can go and check the histories. Oops. And then you can return to a particular snapshot in time, basically. So that is how you would work with RN. And then when I commit, you can commit those renv log files as well, just to make sure that you can return those to those at some point in time. I think I've not done a great job of explaining the RN package. It just needs another, I think it really deserves another session of its own.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, I use it quite a bit for work. It's actually a really good package. And what's really nice about it is that, say I tell you that, or I have it in the code that we need to use dplyr, let's say, but I'm using a different version of dplyr than you're using, right? So at some points, maybe some function might be deprecated in dplyr, or they might change the functionality. So even though you have the same package installed, you might have different experiences because you don't have exactly the same version. So
Right.
having that having that record of exactly which version of that package you were using. So which version of R, which version of each of the individual packages, so that the person can reproduce that environment or recreate that environment on their own system, and ensure that they're going to get the same kind of experience that you're getting. So that is very critical and really good advice. So I agree with that too.
I'm just sweating here about my past research where I didn't use RN. What do I do now? Too late. It's out there in the world.
Very much.
Maybe the CRAN time capsule will save me. But
Mhm. Okay, yep. So that was the only question people typed in the chat. And go ahead and type other questions if you have them. I'll just go ahead and sneak a question in while we're waiting for the next one. So I'm just kind of curious. I know you kind of mentioned that some of these things became useful to you over time, but how did you, how did you go about learning all of these different packages or resources? Was it basically
by
Google?
being burned. No, this is just 28 different kinds of ways that I got burned because my past self didn't really care or didn't want to
Yeah,
learn what these were.
yeah,
um, you know, I think the biggest teaching moments were like you leave a project alone for a year because your co-authors lose interest or something other priority really comes up because you need to get a project B done really quickly, so you set A aside. Come back after a year and you're like, what the hell have I been doing? And I think that happens because you grow, like your programming abilities really improve over the years, and you're looking at all those residues of your past self. You're like, oh my god, I'm ashamed of what's going on there. And I don't know what I was thinking when I wrote that code. And then you're like, okay, fine, I'll just hold my nose and then run these things. Something doesn't work. Because
yeah.
you have a new computer, you have a new R, you have a new set of package versions, and you're like, where the hell did that go wrong? And then you have to
Right.
then, work through that.
And that's really important. That, just the fact that you gain that intuition just by having these negative experiences and realizing, okay, I got to make sure that I never experience this ever again. What can I do, right? I remember when I used to work as a biostatistician in a research hospital, and I remember there was this situation that popped, and I happened to get in the habit of creating these reproducible projects where I was using SWeave at the time, or Sweave at the time. I'm kind of dating myself, where you have kind of a predecessor, I guess, to R Markdown, but you can interweave your code and your markup and everything at the same time. So you could have the table display, and you could have the graphs, and you could have the mean is in 3.2 or whatever. It just inserts it in. So I just was in the habit of doing that, and I had a client that said, "Well, you've created this report for me. It's great." All these great tables and figures and everything is great, but I need you to take this one patient out of the analysis. Redo everything, all the tables, all the graphs. Just take that one patient out. And at first I panicked, and then I realized, well, wait a minute, I have code that produces all this stuff. So I just modified the data set, the import data set, to take out that one patient and reran everything. And then all of a sudden now, and this was months later after I had already given this to them. So yeah, having that workflow. I mean, I know the topic is for academic research. There's a lot of us who are not in academics, right? But this is so relevant, I think, to any sort of scenario where you're trying to do research for yourself or personal projects, and also especially if you're collaborating with other people or you're doing reports for other people. These are really, really great best practices. So thank
I've
you for that.
definitely been there. I ran everything, made all the figures and tables, realized that, okay, I have three anomalies that make sense to take out, or, oh my God, I didn't export the data properly because there
Mhm.
was an unclosed double quote. And when I went to fix it, I have more observations. What do I do now?
Mhm. So it's nice to not have to start from scratch. You know, you have everything written in code. Okay, looks like you've got a couple more questions. Any tips on using unit tests for academic research? I've mostly used them for package development at work and having a little bit of a hard time thinking how it transfers to academic research.
I think it really depends on what kind of research you do. In my case, a lot of the things that happened to me is let's say that I do one hot encoding because I need something to run things over in the random forest, and then somehow it gets turned into a I need it to be a factor, but it gets into a continuous variables, like simple assertions that um, I think um, I do a lot with like missing values. Like this set in particular shouldn't contain missing values. Are you sure that this is it? Or maybe you're doing filtering and you want to make sure that you filtered things correctly. And does the filtered data set contain variables this and this, or observations this and that? And that this has to make sense. No matter what the logic, what the process of having arrived at that output is. And um, I don't think I do my unit testings properly. Sometimes I go back in time and like, okay, that's something that I should have checked for. But I think that's a really great question. And I think I'll probably start documenting what I do in terms of those assertions. And the second question I think is about this RN procedure similar to Docker. So yeah, in a sense, but I think the RN is really about what packages that you use. It's not about controlling your OS. And I think Docker is uh, that is really about containerizing like the entire setup itself. I mean, I'm not a really like a fluent Docker user myself, so I can't really speak for that. But I know a few people who really go that extra mile because they want to make sure that what their code that runs on Windows runs on a fellow co-author's Unix machine, or Red Hat or whatever.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I've definitely used Docker as well. So I think of Docker as a more extreme case of making sure that you're controlling the environment. So you actually have the entire runtime and all of the different dependencies baked into this container that you can just kind of move around and people can run it off of that container. I think where that's a situation where maybe that would have been helpful would have been, in situations where, for example, you've got Google Chrome, for example, and you're using Selenium or Chrome driver or something like that to scrape data. If you have Google Chrome installed, sometimes Google Chrome will just automatically update itself. So then now without any, and so then that can make it inconsistent with the Chrome driver, which means that now your code doesn't work anymore all of a sudden, and you haven't done anything. It's just that Google Chrome does that. So that's if you have that installed on your machine and you're depending on those packages, you could run into problems. Whereas if you had a container where it's not automatically updating anything, it's just the state of it is just the state. It stays the same. So if you really need more control, yeah, I definitely would use a Docker container. But there is a little bit of a learning curve for Docker. So there's a little bit of a trade-off there. But yeah, they're kind of related frameworks. I definitely agree with that.
I think the really the basic principle in everything is that there is inevitably going to be a learning curve. What I wrote down in my slides is some things that I wish I knew were the goalposts that I wanted to reach at the end of each learning curve that I didn't know was a thing. And just knowing that these are goalposts really helps you with overcoming that learning curve. That this is an important thing.
Okay, no other questions. I did want to ask a career question. So I know that so you're you've entered the realm of academia. So I really like, first of all, that you've shared your path and your journey as a person who has maybe a different sort of path than some of the other types of data science presenters that we've had. Like a lot of people will say, I'm a math background or statistics background or computer science, whatever, but you're actually your specialty is politics and those other kinds of things, and you've learned those skills along the way, which I think is also a very respectable path into data science and using these things, because obviously this means that you're able to use those skills in your work in solving important problems. So that's really really important. But I did want to ask, because I know I get that question a lot, so what kind of advice would you give someone who's trying to learn all of these kinds of things as a person that doesn't have that kind of um, academic training in, say, machine learning and programming and all those kinds of things, where you're picking it up along the way? Did you take any sort of boot camp classes or um, get any sort of certifications or anything, or did you really just kind of learn everything as you needed it?
No, I really learned everything as I went. I was a Stata user before entering my PhD. I hate Stata now. Wait a minute, sorry. No, literally, I didn't need. It was my second year of my PhD, so it's only been like a journey of 5 years or so that I started with R. And boy, did I mess up a whole lot in the beginning. I think. And I get that because I teach a one semester's worth of data analysis in political science, and boy, do my students hate me because I made them do R. Oh God, I think like boot camps can help, but some of them can be really outdated. I think follow if you're following Our Ladies Global and know it's there. I think you're already like halfway there to building your skills. But I think the it's a trial and error process, and I think you should forgive yourself for not getting it the first time. You're making mistakes, and I think a lot of people who come from a mathy, statsy, computer programming backgrounds have a really hard time accepting that it's okay to mess up. You're at the beginning of that journey, and I think our community in general is an extremely patient community compared to some of the other programming language communities, and I think it's okay to ask questions and things like that. But I think one thing that really really boosted my abilities is some time in that learning curve, I decided that I want to write functions because I'm repeating those processes and I want to make that into an R package that I'm going to install and use every time. And I think that really forced me to think about what the end product that I wanted to achieve, what were the inputs going to be, what were the options that I wanted to allow for. So that really kicked me upwards, I think.
I love that image. Kicked you upwards. I love it.
Forcible. It's like forcible. It's like a rocket ejection. Like you have no choice. You have to go up.
Great stuff. Okay. Any other last call for questions? I don't see any others posted. Um, I guess as one of the final things. So I know you said you're going to post the slides and everything on the. So we'll make sure that those are going to be available to everyone. Any last minute comments or anything you wish you had said earlier? Anything?
Um, I think don't be impatient about you know your first processes. Like um, you want to get an output really really quickly, so oftentimes you're like, I'll just write this code now and think about reproducibility, or I'll think about improving or those codes later, like refactoring them later. uh, you don't want to do that. You actually want to make sure that this is your best code before you move forward with that. And even then, you'll have to come back and rewire some things, a lot of things. And so I think oftentimes people really grow impatient because they want to see a result, but it really just saves time in the long end.
Great point. Great point. Yeah, I was actually thinking about that as you were saying, okay, create a GitHub repository and create an R project, an R Studio project, and do unit testing and Xtable and Stargazer, and all these terms are flying by people's heads, and they're like, okay, I don't know how to do all this. I'm feeling intimidated, which leads people to say, well, I'm just not going to do it at all because I can't do everything. But yeah, I mean, if you can incrementally increase your skill set by trying, some combination of these things, maybe one or two of them, and getting some intuition and then folding some of these other things into it, I think that will make you a much better researcher or scientist, or whatever your role is. But yeah, definitely give yourself some space to grow. I agree with that. Excellent. Well, thank you, Dr. Kim. Thank you, Dr. Kim. I really
Thank you.
appreciated you joining us and for being here to answer all these questions and giving us all these great tips. When you give me the slides, I'll make sure that I make those available to everyone, and then we'll coordinate also um, the recording, the release of the recording. But I think that's it.
Thanks for everyone, especially in those, hardcore time zones. Really appreciate it. If you need, if you want to talk about some of the things, my Twitter and website should be available on the meetup page. So feel free to contact through those. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Felicity, for staying up till 1 a.m. Thank you, Robert, for your patience. And I know you had problems getting access to the session the last few times.